Today we prepared a different program. The panelists are Yeşim from the World Bank, from another institution of the World Bank, IFC Tunç Bey, Meltem Hanım from TSKB, Aydın Bey from Crescent Capital, and from the company which manages the MITSEP programs, and Michel Marcini and program manager from EBRD, Hamdi Bey.
EBRD'nin program yöneticisi Andy bugün bizlerle.
We are going to talk about both applications and policy. We also would like to talk about the questions of the institutions that approve the credit line applications. We would like to talk about what criteria do the banks look when someone makes an application. In this context, wind power constitutes the biggest expectation in Turkey's renewable energy program. As the energy demand increases in the following years, we consider the wind power will have the biggest share of the investments in the renewable energy area. When we look at the OECD countries, we see that wind power constitutes 47% of the renewable energy investments in these countries. It is the same in Turkey. However, in the countries that are not in OECD, this number is lower.
Yenilenebilir yatırımların %47'si gibi bir rakam, bir oranı görüyoruz rüzgarda. Türkiye'de de yine aynı şekilde ama OECD dışı ülkelerde biraz daha az görünüyor.
Of course, until today, people were interested in the licensing regulations or technological side of it. However, we think that the financing of these projects will be the main area in meeting the demands of the increasing energy demand. As the Ministry, we coordinate the studies that will support the financing of these projects and the financing institutions' allocation of resources in this area. Until today, there was not many financing problems because there were not big investments in the area. The capacities are not huge. However, with the latest regulations, we predict that there will be increased capacity investments and they will need increased financing needs. First, I want to introduce Meltem Hanım from TSKB. They both apply a program in this area and receive applications. And they are one of the leading banks that investors apply for financing. Welcome, Meltem Hanım. I will give you the microphone to you. The floor is yours. Before passing to the topics of what we are looking for in a project finance and credit application, I would like to talk briefly about what our situation is in terms of wind. As you may know, in 2007, renewable energy resource applications were received via tendering procedure, and tender bids were taken in 13 packages, and as a result, 5,500 megawatt capacity allocation was made for 6,664 megawatt capacity and distributed to the applicants. In these tender offers, the type of tendering was determining the lease charges, while a price of 1.8 kuruş per kilowatt-hour on average was set. The biggest contribution margin was determined as 6.5 kuruş per kilowatt-hour. The low ones are not very important for us, but the high ones are important. I will try to explain its reasons later on. If we take today's exchange rate, the biggest contribution margin is around 2.4 euro cents. In fact, there are lots of projects around this value. If you look at the prices applied for the wind in the TWEC law, a firm will be able to sell its electricity that it produces from 5.4 euro cents. In theory, while it is possible that with different domestic production contribution margins, this price can go up to 8.1 euro cents. Practically, we have not seen any applications of this. So if you ask what information you are looking for as a bank, we look at plume prices at first, and secondly we are looking at the lump sum prices, which is 5.4 euro cent. Also we look at the average plume prices based on euro. The prices fluctuate between 5 and 6 euro cents, especially if it is the wind, meaning that the reservoir is not a hydroelectric power plant. It cannot realize sales in peak hours. In this case, it means that our wind turbine and plume will not be able to have better prices than lump sum. Especially it is not a producer with a big package, such as the ones that have a hydroelectric power plant, wind or natural gas. If it is just a package that includes a few wind power generator, it is more difficult to catch the higher prices in this kind of power plant. So in this context, when an investor comes through our doors, what do we look at as a technical bank? We would like to have a wind measurement for a couple of years so that we can forecast the production with confidence. Sometimes project comes with some problems in their wind data, as they may have some months of wind data, then missing several months, then another few months of data. In this kind of projects, we cannot analyze the feasibility very comfortably. We would like to have a feasibility report that we can forecast the production with confidence. In addition to this, of course, the selection of turbine is important for us. We would like to see the turbines of the companies that we know that their products are reliable. Later on, we'll look at the turbine's location. We prepare our feasibility reports with different energy forecasts, applying different possibilities to different events. It means we do not go forward with the worst possible production levels. We look at the average production of the power plant. And finally, we expect the power plant has all the permits required. The check document should have been completed. Connection agreements should have been completed. Military permit should have been taken. Forest permit should have been taken, and some other permits that are required at the moment. Because sometimes new permits are added to the requirements, for example, did not exist in a few years ago. I do not remember the exact time of it. A new permit or authorization may be added a few months later. We also have to see the expropriation stage, although the process has not been completed yet. Based on this, we prepare our own production scenarios and cash flows, and after this, we ask for some things from the companies for financing normally. First of all, we have to make an agreement about how the stakeholders' equity will be staged and when. We may want to require to put the equity at the very beginning, and the ratio of the equity may be 25% as well as 35% or 50%. Here, the importance of lease charges comes into play. If it's a project with high level of lease charges, there are certain maturity dates we can offer as banks. These maturity dates normally do not exceed 10, 11 or maybe 12 years, and we do not extend the maturity longer than these. And with the level of lease charges, the projects can handle 50%, maybe 60% of debt rate. When the investors do not want to invest that amount as shareholders' equity or cannot make that commitment, the financing of this project becomes impossible. So, this is the importance of lease charges. So if you think about why the projects do not get financing, most of the issue is here. There are also some expectations from the investors other than these. We would like to see the guarantee that the investor will meet the possible cost increases in the future. This is not a problem usually for wind. For the wind project, the cost of investment does not increase dramatically like a hydroelectric power plant may. Already we have the contract in our hands and the purchase agreements of the turbine have already been made. Of course, there may be some increases in the costs. For example, the road to the turbines may be winding and it may cost a little more. However, again, the costs do not increase as it is the case in a hydroelectric plant, but we still want investors guarantee this. We include some covenants about the limits on financial debt. These are made mostly in STDs, but even it is not in the STD. We want the project-based or company-based debt not to exceed certain levels. This means that they may not be able to use any other credit without our permission other than our credit. We want the project to have certain debt ratio limits. We create our projection according to these levels. If the project cannot maintain these levels, we as the bank and the investor decide how to proceed in about a year. We bring constraints to dividends. We do not allow a company that does not meet the debt ratios or performance criteria to issue dividends. If there is an excess fund in that particular year, it cannot be distributed as dividend but added to the shareholders' equity in order to meet a possible bad performance in financial tables next year. I would like to say something about maturity before I pass to indemnities. As I said before, we can offer only certain amount of maturity, like 10 or 12 years. In wind projects, the investors should evaluate IS option. Right now, many wind investors obtain their financing with IS option. In this case, they can get maturities of 13 or 15 years for their projects. Some investors can make it as a direct lending without the need to involve any Turkish bank's counter guarantee in the process. In other cases, for the investors who cannot make this can use the Turkish bank's counter guarantee, and all Turkish banks can become the intermediary for this. In this way, they can get a longer maturity date, and the cost of the construction other than the cost of turbine is also financed by the Turkish bank. This gives an opportunity to obtain longer maturities for the projects with higher royalty. However, for the very high royalty project, even the ISEs do not save the project to express the truth. What are we getting as assurance? We get the stocks of the project company as assurance. Also, we take the right of construction lien account receivables. Also take the income other than the income from sales of electricity. We take machine equipment commercial license, project completion guarantee. I will tell its details later on. We also get sponsor support. I will also tell this in detail. What are the problems in financing? Here, we listed the assurances we take. Some of these assurances sometimes or always can stay as incomplete. For example, we say we take the right of construction lien, but most of the time this cannot be achieved due to some legal changes, such as not being able to take the right of construction of the location of the dam. In account receivables, if the firm is selling with some mutual agreements, we can get the alienation of these. If it will enter Yektem or will sell in Punum, the problem here is Teyyaş or Punum's not going approval to the account receivables. According to Turkish law, for the transfer of account receivables, this approval is required. Therefore, although we say that we are taking some assurances in theory, but in reality, these assurances do not exist. In this case, the topic comes to the assurances of completion guarantee or stock support, which investors do not like much. You are making a project finance and its investment finance, and yes, its investment takes some time, like 1 or 2 years sometimes, and later on you base it on cash flow. It will pay by itself. But in reality, you do not have any assurances. To say the truth, in this case, there is no other option than to take some guarantees until we see that some things are on its way and that the project is already performing. Also, sometimes the investor comes to us by buying a turbine that we have never seen. We don't know how it works in wind, etc. As a result, in production, a lower projection can be made, and in those cases, the debt-equity ratios can be much higher. Since the investor wants to get more debt in this regard, we need all these guarantees. I mean, if the project is paying 3 lira, but the investor wants 4 lira financing, in this case a personal guarantee is needed. I want to explain the reason behind the things that we want from the investors, because sometimes it is seen as these needless requirements cause the denial of the credit, but banks do not require this for no purpose. There are some legal and technical causes all behind these denials. I would like to emphasize something. We generally do not have any function about equity financing because there are already private companies for this. However, investors want their shareholders' equity to be financed by banks or by some funds. We are also aware of this need. We may want to pull back the requirement to put 30% equity to 15%. There are some methods to do this around the world. I am sure some of our speakers can explain them better than me. The institutions that have funds, such as electricity funds, or funds just funded in order to invest, you can think of this as a portfolio management. You can do this. Even the treasury can do this. If there is a legal structure in the country to form such funds, they can enter into the purchasing of investment in some privatization issue, or they can enter into an investment as an investor. The thing that they do in reality is to provide a certain rate of contribution to the shareholders' equity of the investor, and they become a partner in the project. After the project is completed, they may exit from the project with different methods. But in these cases, the investor should be interested and desire to work with this kind of fund. Turkish investors are generally not happy with more partners, unfortunately. Of course, there should be such a structure formed so that the funds may like exit time from the project. Again, as I mentioned earlier, in high-level interest charged projects, there is not much incentive for funds to get it into the project. Because after the project is completed and the cash flow is established, it will sell it again to the original investor, or it will sell to a third party, or it will arrange an IPO for the project in order to exit the project. Now, it is very difficult to arrange a public offering of certain size of projects to the public. Only in big portfolios this can happen. To have success in public offering, there really must be some profitable project or projects. These kind of studies are also discussed in the ministry level. I cannot say today that there will be a domestic fund to be established. However, there are foreign funds that do this. Maybe the speakers after me will mention them. These are the things that I wanted to tell you briefly. As TSKB, we financed more than 80 hydroelectric plants, more than 10 wind plants, 2 geothermal projects, and 4 biomass projects. More than half of these are right now working and they are paying themselves. When we look behind, we can see that even though they do not have high lease charges, some projects may have some challenges from time to time. Because, for example, water is very fractious for hydroelectric plants. In terms of payments, we did not have any problems until today. We gave financing to the right investors and they contributed in the years the contributions were needed, and they got back their contributions the next year. As TSKB, we financed many projects in this regard and we have experience. If you have some questions, I can answer them. Thank you. We asked Meltem Hanım to explain more about assurance. Also, we asked her to inform us about the wind power and its relationship with banks. If you ask your questions just after the speaker rather than asking at the end of the panel, I think you will not forget them. Of course, we'll take some questions, general questions at the end. As far as I know, I heard that as TSKB you cannot provide financing for energy projects right now. Is this right? No, it's not right. You are talking about today, right? I think that since the SKB gave most of its financing to energy projects because as of today some constraints by the BDDK. I heard this around. Let me explain it to you. No constraints were issued by the BDDK. We are a bank that uses direct credit from IFC, and IFC has some covenants on the bank as we have covenants on the projects that we finance. One of these was we cannot concentrate more than 30% of our portfolio in just one sector. We got permission from IFC to increase this number to 40%. Therefore, we can provide financing to energy projects. We do not have any problem. However, with the know-how we got from all of these past experiences, we are more selective in this process now. For example, when a small hydroelectric plant project comes to us such as 10 to 15 megawatts, before we ask for some conditions related to chat. Right now, these conditions are much different. In some projects that we say that it's small does not much effect on the environment, they don't need chat not required document, or the current chat is not enough. We come to a position that we ask for not only the chat of the project but also chat of the basin. So, when we tell this to the investors, the project owners do not want to do this, so we cannot finance that project. Thus, our selectiveness and conditions are a lot different, since until a certain royalty, our expectation for prices is much different. We were financing until this limit, but now we can finance with much less royalty level. So we can finance. We do not have any constraints. In fact, we have now more resource to finance projects, but we only finance the projects that we really think they are outstanding. I would like to add something. These rules about financing are mentioned under the program credit section. Since it is not a commercial credit, they are subject to public tracking. Therefore, it cannot be stopped by any arbitrary decision. Since they are long-term, long maturity, countrywide based credits, they are under protection by international agreements as well. I felt something from PSKB like in hydroelectric plants there were many unforeseen problems. Since the increases in the risk that were not seen at the beginning, the wind plants may be under much stricter scrutiny for this reason. Because in banking a rigid forecast is very important because all the financing depends on these forecasts. But we held our demand roof a little wide today as credit portfolio. We will also give more information about program credits in the following minutes. So I wanted to add that such an international credit program cannot be stopped arbitrarily. Erdin Çelik from Erdem Holding. In your speech, you said that you looked at production amounts from different rates. Now I will criticize a little. With the accredited wind report, you were given a P50, P75, P90 production. It seems like you take the average of these and use P75. I just want to clarify this point. No, we are not taking P75. Even though we do not take P90, we take rates close to P90. In this case, you have accredited reports, assurances, reductions, etc. And on top of these, if you take the P90, the amount of equity increases so much. No, it does not increase that much. For really good projects, we can finance up to 80%. It does not increase. I would like to ask about energy production. As I understood, you take a production near P90. The actual numbers, as you have more than 10 projects in your portfolio right now. You experience from these projects forces you take P90, I think. Yes. So are the actual productions of these projects at P90 levels?
Biz bahsettiğimiz
From these projects,
fiyat
about 4 or 5 of them
maliyeti
are in
çok
Bandırma
sağlam
region.
kredi. Dolayısıyla
And
ticari kredi
they are
olmadığı
very
için
good projects, and their actual numbers are at the P90 levels. There are some productions higher than that. But when we made our projections, we have forecasted the price differently. We took some hits from that point too. The rates we took were not 5.4 or 5.5 euro cents. We were wrong in that area, for instance. But in our other projects, the productions are in P90 levels, but some of them were lower than expected. We thought that they might have installed the turbines in a wrong way. There is something wrong with it, or the wind was not sufficient in that period. At the meantime, we do not have any default credit. We are very happy with all of our investors. We do not have any problems. However, they may be not that happy for their investments, maybe. The non-licensed rate that will take credit will be very high, I guess. It is still a very investable sector, but their return was not as much as they expected to be. I am Volkan Çavuş from Uras Enerji. Now, when you say that you support good projects, what I understand is what you're looking for is efficiency, meaning the rate of wind, and the lease charges. Everybody looks at the wind anyways. Did we understand correctly? Yes, but also we look at lease charges. I have a question, Meltem Hanım. Do you have anything to say to investors? What do you expect? Are there any parts that create problems for you? Do you expect them to do anything before they apply to you in order to ease your work? As mentioned at the beginning of my speech, we want the wind measurements to be for a long period. If they come with only 6 months of wind measurement, saying that this is a good project, that is not something we can look at as feasibility analysis. Minimum 1 year wind measurement should exist so we can work in a technical way about the production. Our own engineers can also work on measurements and produce a production amount, but at the end of the day, the wind measurements should be done by the companies that are specialized in this field. This is the most important topic. Other than that, if they already made a financial feasibility report, you can bring us, but this is not very important. We prepare our reports anyway. At first, you need to see these things. We are working to reduce investment period to 5 or 6 years, but we see that the technical measurements are very important in this process. I thank Meltem Hanım very much. She also informed us assurances on top of standard presentation. We also have a MIDCEF program that is used by several banks widely. There are applications made through intermediary banks, and there are applications made directly to IMKB. We invited Michel Marcini from the technical team which evaluates the applications in MIDCEF program to our panel. He is from the report preparation side of the team. He will tell us about what they pay attention more when they evaluate such a project. Also, what is MIDCEF program and what kind of program it is.
Çok iyi projelerdi. Evet, gerçekleşmeler T90 seviyelerinde. Yani onun ötesinde.
Yok demek istiyorum yani T50'yi üretiyorlar ya.
Evet, evet, daha yüksek tabii ki. Ondan daha yüksek üretimler oluyor. Fakat biz o projeleri yaptığımızda da fiyatları daha farklı almıştık. Yani oradan bu sefer de hit yedik. Yani bizim aldığımız oranlar da işte 5.4-5.5 euro centler değildi. Orada yanılmışız mesela. Ama diğer projelerimizde üretimler evet P90 seviyelerinde daha kötüsünü de gördüğümüz yıl oldu. Yani bir yıl hiç rüzgar esmedi herhalde diye düşünüyorum ya da türbinleri şey yaptılar. Hani yani onu o sene düşündük ya bu türbinleri yanlış yerleştirdiler. Bir şey var burada yani hani diye. Yok değil, öyle olmamış, o yıl esmemiş yani. O dönem esmemiş ve yaşadık bunu. Bu arada hiç ödenmeyen bir kredimiz yok çok şükür. Hani bütün yatırımcılarımızdan son derece memnunuz. Öyle bir sıkıntımız yok. Ama onlar yatırımlarından ilk gün umdukları kadar memnun değiller belki. Yani krediler ödendikten sonra hepsi çok güzel olacak zaten. Yani hala çok yatırım yapılabilir bir sektör ama bekledikleri kadar olmadı. Beyefendi bir şey soruyor mu?
Merhaba, Rastan Enerji'den Volkan Çavuş ben. Şimdi iyi projeleri destekliyoruz dediğinizde benim anladığım temelde en çok dikkat ettiğiniz şey verimlilik, yani rüzgarın esme oranı. Ondan sonrakiler belki de çok gerekli değil. Yani zaten herkes buna bakıyor yani. Ama bizim ilk baktığımız şey diyorsunuz, rüzgarın esme oranı, projenin verimliliği. Doğru anlamışız değil mi?
Bir, ikincisi de ödemez. Evet.
Teşekkürler.
Benim bir sorum olacak Meltem Hanım. Biz burada bugün bilgi veriyoruz ama ben sizin şöyle bir sorunuz var mı? Yani yatırımcılara sizin söylemek istediğiniz bir şeyler var mı? Yatırımcılardan beklediğiniz kredi başvurusunda sizde zorlayan bölümler oluyor mu? Başvuru dosyası hazırlarken hazırlamadan önce, size başvurmadan önce yapmalarını beklediğiniz bir şey var mıdır? Kolaylaştırıcı olarak sizin işlerinizi.
Yani rüzgar ölçümlerinin sunum başında belirtmeye çalıştığım gibi yeterince uzun süreli olmasını istiyoruz. Yani bize 6 aylık bir rüzgar ölçümüyle iyi proje diye gelinmesini yani buyurup gelebilirler tabii ki ama hani bakabileceğimiz bir fizibilite olmaz o teknik anlamda. Minimum bir senelik bir rüzgar ölçümü olmalı ki teknik anlamda üretime yönelik bir çalışma yapabilelim. Bizim kendi mühendislerimiz de o rüzgar ölçümlerini inceleyerek bir üretim tutarı çıkarıyorlar, hani çalışıyorlar bu konuda ama eninde sonunda o rüzgar ölçümlerinin tabii ki bu konunun uzmanı kuruluşlar tarafından hazırlanmış bir teknik full fizibilitesinin olması gerekiyor. Bu öncelikle en önemli konu. Ondan sonra yani finansal fizibiliteyi yapmak bizim için problem değil. Yani firma onu yapmış olsa da olur, olmasa da olur. Yani bize verse de olur, vermese de olur ama zaten kendileri muhakkak ki yaparlar yani karar vermek için. En başta bizim bunları görmemiz lazım.
Teşekkür ederiz Meltem Hanım. Tabii burada bir şey ön plana çıkıyor. Bakanlık olarak biz yatırım süresini 5 yılın altına indirmek için uğraşıyoruz ancak bir yıllık ölçümleme sadece bakanlığın veya kurulun lisanslama sürecinde gerekli bir ölçüm müdür değil midir konusunu bir tarafa bırakırsak finansal edilebilirliğini de ölçmek açısından bir bankacı açısından da doğru projeyi değerlendirebilmek adına iyi bir nitelikli bir ölçüm gerekli olduğunu görüyoruz. Ben Meltem Hanım'a teşekkür ediyorum sunumu için. Bizi sanırım teminatlar konusunda da biraz ayrıntılı olarak bilgilendirdi. Yani standart bir sunum dışında. Teşekkürler. Tabii bir MİTSEF programımız var. Yaygın bir şekilde birkaç banka tarafından ortak olarak kullandırılmakta. Tabii aracı bankalarla yapılan başvurular var. Bir de doğrudan EBR'de yapılan başvurular da var. Tabii biz MİTSEF programı bünyesinde bu başvuruları değerlendiren teknik ekipten Michel Manseni'yi davet ettik bugün panelimizi. Kendisinden bir projenin değerlendirme raporunu, yani daha çok raporu hazırlayan taraf diyelim, değerlendiren değil, raporu hazırlayan tarafta. Kendileri teknik danışman. Bizi bu tür projeyi değerlendirirken nelere daha çok dikkat ediyorlar? Bir de MİTSEF programı hakkında nasıl bir programdır? Size bu konularda bilgi vermek üzere bugün aramızda. Ben sözü Mişel'e devrediyorum. Mişel.
Hello everybody. Just I will say a couple of words regarding the company which I'm working on. It is a global company whose headquarters is based in Denver, and it's an engineering and design company specialized in wet infrastructure and environmental and energy services. We have office everywhere almost, well, widespread in the world and of course in Europe, and we established the Turkish office a couple of years ago as a project-based office thanks to some big project that we have been we are working for EBRD. Currently, last year the office became a permanent office, so now we are an office no more project-based, although we have big project with EBRD, and today I would like to focus my presentation on the MIDCEF project. So MIDCEF stands for Mid-Size Sustainable Energy Financing Facility, and it is a credit line that was launched in 2011 by EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, to support the financing of renewable energy and energy efficiency project in Turkey. The facility has also, I would say, the main target of the facility is to increase the standards in terms of environment, social and health and safety aspects during the project design, implementation and then operation of renewable energy and also energy efficiency project. Within this facility, EBRD, with a co-financing of European Investment Bank, is providing about 1 billion euro to 7 local banks. You can see the name of the local banks in this slide, for on lending to private sector borrowers for the implementation of renewable and energy efficiency project. So this is the structure almost of the facility. There is of course EBRD with, as I said, a co-financing of EIB, who is providing this 1 billion euro to the 7 commercial banks we saw before, and the commercial banks are then in contact, of course, with the sponsors for financing their projects. So the project team, which is the team, MWH team, together it is actually a consortium of 4 companies. We are working as consultants, and we work in close cooperation, of course, with all the 3 parties involved in the project. So with the EBRD, of course, with the commercial banks, and especially with the sponsor, so who is actually developing the land. You see that there is also a monitoring team. In particular, in MIDCEF, the monitoring team and the project team are the same. So this is a very positive aspect, because we know the project since the beginning, and then we follow up also in the following phase, so during the construction and operation phase as well. Of course, the MIDCEF has some eligibility criteria. MIDCEF stands, as I said, by mid-size sustainable energy financing facility. So mid-size, what we mean is between a renewable project between 5 and 50 megawatt. For hydro project, actually the threshold is 40 megawatt. For wind project, it is 50. This doesn't necessarily means that no project outside this range are financed. It means that the projects are evaluated in that case, are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And as integration, there is also another facility, always financed by EBRD, which is TWEC, that is more targeting smaller projects. So projects between, 0, let's say, of course, to 10 megawatt. There is also a certain overlap, because in this way we don't want to miss any project. So between 0 and projects spanning from 0 to 50 megawatt can be financed under one of these 2 facilities. While TWEC can give a financing of maximum 5 million euro, the MIDCEF eligibility criteria in terms of loan that can be provided is between 10 to 40 million euro, although we can sometimes consider also below 10 million euro. So we are covering the full range of projects between 0 and, let's say, 40, 50 megawatt. The facility is targeting also energy efficiency project and waste to energy project. And an additional value is that several projects from the same sponsors can be financed, and this already happened during this project. And also different phases of the same project can be financed, if they are actually different phases, of course. There are some other eligibility criteria. So the total investment cost should not exceed 50 million. Again, sometimes we can consider a waiver for project, but it is normally 50 million. It is normally the threshold above which we cannot consider the project. This 50 million does not include VAT, although include the interest during construction. And then there are three very basic requirements in terms of project profitability. So an internal rate of return of 7%, net present value positive, and a payback time of lower than 15 years. These we consider them as eligibility criteria, but we never met a project with lower performance, because it's of course in the interest also of the sponsor, mainly of the sponsor per se. Okay, in this slide I'm trying to introduce the main benefits of this facility, of this credit line for all the parties involved. So first of all, of course, there is a significant and relevant injection of liquidity into the market. Then for the local banks, we are supportive because we work in close cooperation with the local project financing team of the banks. And one of the key points of this facility is the capacity building within the bank, especially in terms of environmental, social, and health and safety aspects. These are the same aspects on which we work with the project sponsor in order to sometimes increase the standards that are applied in the project, and also to, of course, reduce the risk associated to these aspects, and therefore the possible liabilities on the sponsor. The most important aspect, probably from the sponsor's point of view, is that MIDSEF provide good financials for the sponsors. So in terms of interest rates and maturity, which is of course the main attraction of the project of the facility for a sponsor. And then under this facility there is also a carbon service that is provided for free to the sponsors. So there is a consultant who can assist the sponsor during the preparation and can directly prepare a project design document or whatever is necessary for a gold standard or a voluntary carbon standard certification, and this is provided for free to the sponsor. So that's an added value. Okay, I will not go through in detail into this slide, but it's just to show how this facility works. So the sponsor normally present and show their project to the local banks, to the eligible local banks, and the local banks in the project finance team that is almost always headquartered in Istanbul, they generally consult us on the possible eligibility of the project in terms of capacity, loan, and investment. This is done very quickly, so as soon as we are contacted by the bank, the same day or one day, we provide a preliminary feedback. Afterward, the bank and the sponsor, of course, discuss on the term sheet, which is quite time-consuming, but is the normal procedure during project financing, and they provide some basic documents to the MIDSEF team, which are documents that are generally always provided to the banks. So production license, feasibility study, wind resource assessment, CHED, and PTB. These are the basic documents that we require at the first stage. Afterward, we start preparing our internal documentation, and once the main agreement between the bank and the sponsor are done, there is a main phase which is called, we call the preparation of a document which is called Rational Energy Utilization Plan. So we analyze the project from the different point of view, perspectives, technical, environmental, social, health, safety, financial and carbon part. And then we deliver 3 documents, and a couple of these documents are attached to the loan agreement. So what does it mean? It means that this document, which is called Environmental and Social Action Plan, contains a list of actions that we require to the sponsor to implement. These are mainly, as I said, environmental, social and health safety actions that the sponsor should implement in order to be compliant with the loan agreement that is signing. This is quite important because afterwards, during construction and operation, we perform the monitoring phase. So we go on site and check whether these actions are implemented or not. And this is a key point because their implementation is fundamental in order to confirm the MINSET loan and condition. Of course, we do not act as validator or as not as validator, because we are supportive to the sponsors. So we provide all the clarification, all the indication that are needed, because it is in everybody's interest, of course, that the project is finalized with success. So this is briefly how it works. I will just show some of the results that we have obtained. You can see the map with the location of the project that were financed or that are in the pipeline. And the blue, dark blue are wind projects. So you can see that they are mainly located in the Marmara and the Aegean region. We have to now assess 38 projects for an official disbursement. By official, I mean the loan agreement are already signed, which is about 400 million, and there are other projects in the portfolio not yet signed, but that will be signed probably in the next few weeks. So for a total of 550 almost million euro. 11 of these 38 projects, so about 30% are wind projects. These are an important part of the facility. And as I said, they are mainly located in the Aegean and Marmara region for a total investment cost, so not of course what has been financed by MINSET, but this is the investment cost of about 400 million euro. And the electricity, you can see the electricity production is about 1 terawatt-hour per year. This is of course estimation because most of them are just under construction. But just to give an idea, it could be something around the electrical consumption of a city, similar to, in size, similar to Edirne in terms of household consumption, of course. These are a couple of charts that give an idea of what we have financed in terms of wind sector. We financed 336 megawatt of wind plant, which constitute, as you can see from the pie chart, more than 50% of the total financed megawatt. While in terms of share of MINSET loans is around 200 million and is 35% almost. Okay, this reflects the fact that sometimes hydro loans are bigger, although the megawatt installed are lower, and also the fact that sometimes we finance just the civil part of a wind power plant, because sometimes the sponsor go for ECA loans, but ECA can be used just for financing the equipment and not the civil part of the work. So sometimes we finance only the civil part on the other hand. Okay, just a couple of brief overview on the case studies. This is a Vingic, a project located in Bandirma that MINSET has financed with 10 million euro. As you can see, I listed here some of the main environmental and social issues that we face during project assessment. So the landscape impact, land acquisition, stakeholder engagement, especially bird impact. So what we ask is in general to the sponsor to provide some documentation that shows that they are taking care about, for example, the migratory routes, they are taking the opportune mitigation actions, and so the actions that should be implemented in order to mitigate the impact on environment, social and health and safety. In this case, this is one of the first projects we have completely finalized, including the monitoring phases, and it has been concluded with success. And furthermore, in this project, they are also undergoing carbon registration. They are now in the validation phase of the carbon project under gold standard, and we expect to be registered probably in the next few weeks. So this is a very complete project that we have performed under this facility. And then Samullo, it is another, this time it's located in Izmir, and it is another project that was successfully completed. In this moment we have 3 projects which have been completely finalized, and they are all the 3 projects are wind projects. So this shows also that, of course, the companies working in the wind sector are somehow more prepared to acknowledge higher the European level standard in terms of environment, social and safety.
Thank you very much, Hans. Is there any questions?
Are there any questions?
Just one. Did you fully finance those last 2 projects, or did you finance something else?
With generally the agreement of how much in percentage to finance of the project is decided by the local bank. So MIDSEF, EBRD, and we as consultants do not intervene. What we have seen is that generally these projects are financed between 70 and 80%, and if I remember well, in this case it was the same.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
We learned how MIDSEF work reports are prepared, what are the eligibility criteria. Knowing these criteria help while preparing an application. However, in these studies, the most important aspect is that we think that MIDSEF consulting will be very effective in the individual investments, for which the limit is now increased to 1 megawatt. That is why we invited them to give information about MIDSEF and TWEC. We thank you if there is no other question.
Özellikle MIDSEF ve TWEC ile ilgili bilgi vermek üzere davet ettik. Teşekkür ederiz. Başka bir soru yok sanırım. Teşekkürler.
We have another guest from EBRD that could not put his name on the program sheet. His name is Andy. Andy will inform us about EBRD's process, about their own credit lines approvals.
EBRD'nin kendi onayladığı krediler hakkında bilgi verecek.
Also, there are credits that EBRD transferred to the banking sector. He will try to give you the perspective while they're assessing in general. How do they evaluate a credit application or investment financing as a bank? We added Andy to the program as a bonus. We thank him very much.
Çok teşekkür ederiz kendisine kırmaya katıldıkları için. Floor is yours, Andy.
Thanks, Mohamed. Good morning, everyone. I will give my speech without a presentation. Unfortunately, we have not been able to upload the presentation I brought with me. But I will begin briefly with a very quick overview of what EBRD does for those of you who are not familiar with it. EBRD is basically a multilateral institution which is owned by 65 governments and 2 institutional shareholders, the European Commission, the EIB. And it was established initially with the goal of fostering transition in the former communist bloc, but over the years we have started to expand our operations in Turkey in 2008 and more recently in the Arab Spring countries in North Africa and the Middle East. So at the moment we have 34 countries in which we operate in. Since our existence in 1991, we have lent or invested in equity in about 84 billion euros in total and close to 4,000 projects. EBRD does both debt and equity, as you might understand. About 80 to 20 has been the ratio of the investment so far. And we're capable of doing anything basically that is out there, starting from absolute non-recourse financing all the way to the other spectrum of ordinary share and everything in between. On the debt side, we usually do tenors of up to 15 years, rarely do we go beyond that. And in general, we are limited to financing a specific project up to 35% of the project cost. This for wind projects can include anything from cost of development, interest during construction, VAT, EPC costs and so on, cost of equipment and so on and so forth. How do we see the market in general? And this is not only specific to Turkey, but it's overall the 34 countries we operate. The key challenges that we see for financing a project in terms of whether it's a wind project or something else is at first even though we're multilateral and we are created to actually take risk, and we're told that no matter how difficult the situation in the country is, we have to do projects there, period. We still need to see, in order to also be able to bring co-financing partners, a stable and predictable regulatory framework. And most of the countries that we operate in, and Turkey as well, this regulatory framework keeps evolving because most of the countries have gotten into the renewable energy over the last few years. It's our job actually to try to work both with our co-financing partners and with the authorities to help people both understand and mitigate these risks. One of the things that, for example, we're doing together with the Turkish authorities is to work over a renewable energy action plan, which is intended for us to try to assist the Turkish authorities in meeting all of the renewable targets that the Turkish government has set for 2023. Obviously, the legal framework is also important for bankers because from strictly a financial perspective, of course, we'd like to get paid out of cash flow, but in case the cash flow of the project happens not to be there, we need to be able to enforce our security. So we need to know that we are able to enforce it. Now, Teman was mentioned, for example, some issues with assignment of receivables before. We need to know that the dispute resolution functions well. Knock on wood, at least in our Turkish projects so far, we haven't had to experience this. And I think many of our co-financing partners have not, but that's quite an important part, I think, of the assessment process, quite a key challenge in building the projects. The next thing is obviously the permitting and licensing process. In some countries this tends to be faster, some tends to be slower. I remember once seeing that there are countries for a wind project where from basically starting the development work until actually have a project ready to build, it takes about 8 months. There were some other countries where it took 60, and some of those countries where it took 60 months were actually European Union countries. So there isn't a great recipe there, but obviously from the perspective of the developer on one side, from the perspective of the bank on another side, you want as clear a process as possible. That basically means that the legislation needs to be laid out neatly. People need to know where to go in order to get able to get all of their permits, and they need to be able to get a quick period of time. In some countries, for example, because of the backlog of work, etc., this takes a long period. One of the many solutions that can be offered, for example, to shorten this kind of approval process, which hampers especially the small projects, would be to introduce concepts like silent approval from the authorities. If an application if an application is filed and no response is received within, let's say, 90 days, this application is approved. The third key challenge that obviously comes in financing the project from our perspective is that you need some contractual relations. If you want to look at a non-recourse project, a classic non-recourse, you need essentially 4 things: a good EPC contract, a good O&M contract, a good offtake, and a good fuel supply agreement. Obviously, in the case of the renewables, the fuel supply agreement goes away because you're depending on an element of nature, and as a bank, you have to assess this together with the client and your consultants to best assessment for how your resource is going to work. So then you're left with a power purchase agreement or a feed-in tariff, and the long-term power purchase agreements, for example, in Turkey are not existent. So that from a bank perspective is a challenge. The EPC contract needs to be Turkey watertight if the bank is to take actual EPC and construction risk. And obviously you need an experienced operation management company to operate your project. Looking at the Turkish market, for example, I just touched a little bit upon the feed-in tariffs. A lot of the international banks, when they do a forecast, they do a debt sizing for a wind project. They will usually look at what they can predict as a stable cash flow. So they will usually look at the feed-in tariff. That usually will give them more certainty, will make it easier for them to go to their credit committee. In the case of Turkey, the feed-in tariff is perceived as a floor, as a safety net, as opposed to the primary element on which you structure the project. So the project often are structured actually on the market price, which historically has been higher than the feed-in tariff. It's not the wrong way. If you look at some of the EU countries, some of the feed-in tariffs are being retroactively clawed back, so there is no certainty there as well. It's just that from a bank assessment perspective, it makes it a little bit more difficult. It may require that the bank goes more conservative. If, for example, Melton was mentioning that banks may use a P90, and often a debt service cover of 1.1, 1.15 to size the debt if they're relying on the feed-in tariff. If you're asking a bank to go merchant, the bank may look at 1.3, 1.4. The reason being that the fluctuations in price from year to year are high. And if you look at the Turkish example, the average market price has been maybe about $85 to $90 per megawatt hour ever since the balancing market was introduced. But there have been prices as low as 73, which was in 2011. And while then you can assess that over time as an investor, you'll get paid because you make a certain return and you can make your projections of $88 or $90. As a bank, unfortunately, you need to get paid every 3 or 6 months. And that for example, is a bit of an issue. Lenders do need a predictable revenue stream when they do this. In terms of other elements that make a project bankable from our perspective is obviously we need a sufficient level of measurements of the resource risk, because at the end of the day, this is the issue with renewables, that you need to have. The resource varies, or the wind or the water flow will vary from year to year, so you need a long-term measurement. In the wind projects we have financed directly, we've had some, for example, in the first year they perform magnificently, and then as you see the average over 3, 4, 5 years, the performance comes more towards between P75 and P90. In some cases the reverse, the first year is very bad and the performance improves. That's why the sufficient level of measurement is important. You need sponsors with a good track record. So we would not like to see, for example, a sponsor who's there just taken their first license and would like to do a non-recourse project. That's going to be very difficult to finance. We need to look at proven technology. So in general, at least speaking from a perspective of an international level, we do not like product turbines, simply because it is difficult to predict what kind of operational issues they may have once they're installed. It is easier to finance them obviously on a full recourse basis, because then as a bank you're not taking the risk of the project, of the turbine of the project, you're taking a sponsor risk. But if you're looking at the project finance structure, then you need to have a proven technology. The technical and financial due diligence is going to be very detailed, and in the case of the international lenders, very often you'll see requirements for strong environmental and social impact assessment. In the case of multilaterals like ourselves, or IFC for example, or EIB, this will go usually beyond the equator principles. They're going to be much stronger because we're required to do so by our shareholders. And the Turkish government is a shareholder as well, so that requirement comes from them too. We would like to see a project which is prepared to the extent that there are no disputes anymore about grid connection, about land ownership issues, etc. Because again, in the project finance structure, this is not a risk that the lenders should take, and the EPC contractor should be competent and experienced. In terms of what we have done in Turkey so far in this respect, Michele spoke a little bit about MidCEF. EBRD itself, while it finances up to a third of a project cost, it looks for direct financing into projects which are 50 million euros plus. So in order to fill in the gap between the 0 and the 50 million euros, we created the two programs, TWEC, which is for up to 10 million euro financing, and MidCEF, which picks up the slack from 10 to 15 million euros. And so far, between the two programs, together with the co-financing from EIB, we have been able to provide in total about 1.3 billion. 1 billion was in the MidSEF, about 300 million euros is in TORSEF, and there is a discussion to extend this progress further. In terms of direct financing in the wind project, we have provided 180 million euros so far. 45 million have gone to a rotor wind farm of Zorlu Energy in Somalia, which is one of the largest in Turkey at 135 megawatt. And we have co-financed this with IFC, EIB, HSBC, and DenizBank. And lastly, we also financed Energy's Baraj wind farm, which is 142.5 megawatts. We provided 135 million euro loan there together with one of our Austrian co-financing partners. So that's been what we have done in Turkey so far in terms of debt financing. In terms of equity financing, we're open to it, including in the renewable sector, but given the size of the projects in Turkey, and especially in the wind sector, where the average wind farm has been more to the tune of 30, 35, 40 megawatt, the direct investment in equity has been very small for us to make as a BRD and to commit resources directly. So in these occasions, we go through equity funds established in which we take a meaningful share as an anchor investor. And one such fund in which we have invested back in 2011, and we have a 20% hold there, is Clean Energy Transition Fund of Crescent Capital, represented here today by Aga, which is a fund which is invested to a good extent to date, and that has been what the BRD has been able to come up with so far for Turkey in order to fill the need for equity for the development of projects. This is it from me, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
We thank you. Any question?
We thank Andy. We are a little late. It was an important speech. We as the ministry making studies to make international financing corporations or banks to see the future more clearly in the next 10 or 15 years. For these people working in the finance sector to be able to work more efficiently and prepare their reports with confidence, we decided to make an action plan. Of course, this action plan has been talked about in the ministry. This will in the frame of a standard action plan that the EU member first prepared among themselves. On the other hand, Andy looks at the bigger projects that get the approval from the headquarters. These are big-size credits. We thank Andy for his speech. We saw the banking sector's perspective for project finance, its size, assurance, approval, and project evaluation. Another topic that our panel sees important is stakeholders' acuity studies. On recent days, you hear on the news like in the customer credits, they should have this amount of equity or not. In this kind of projects, an equity level of 25% and 50% is looked for. About equity, Aydın Bey from Crescent Capital will talk. They have solution models, and Aydın Bey has worked in this field for long years and is an experienced and quality person.
Değişik boyutlardan, teminattan, başvurudan, nitelikli proje incelemesi açısından bankacılık sektörünün perspektifini gördük. Tabii panelimizin diğer bir önem verdiği konuda öz kaynak çalışmaları, projelerin finansmanında belli bir oranda belki son birkaç gündür televizyonlarda çok yayınlanıyor, işte araç kredilerinde şu kadar öz kaynak olacak, şu kadar konutlarda öz kaynak artacak gibi tüketici krediler için bahsediliyor ama yine bu tür krediler de ilk başta Ertan'ın sunumunda olduğu gibi projenin durumuna ve ölçüm değerlerine göre öz kaynak oranı 25 ile 50 arasında değişen yüzdelerle aranmakta. Öz kaynak kısmı ile ilgili Aydın Beyler Crescent Capital'de bir çözüm modelleri var. Tabii çoğunuz tanıyordur, Aydın Bey bu konuda çok uzun yıllardır çalışmış, başarılı sonuçlar almış bir modelle çalışmakta. Kendisi de bu konuda çok nitelikli bir yerde olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Bizi bilgilendirmesi için bir şey dağıtıyor.
Herkese günaydın.
Thank you. I will keep it short to allow time for our next speakers and the question session.
değerli zamanı bırakmak açısından. Ben yorumlarımı kısa tutacağım. Önce
First,
Crescent Capital'i tanıtmak
I will
istiyorum.
introduce you Crescent Capital and what we do. After that, I would like to inform you about our dynamics with customers and what kind of problems we face in our work. Crescent Capital is the first private fund that invests money especially in energy sector. Among its investors, meaning the source of its funds, are the international finance corporations. One of them is Andy, say EBRD. Many of these corporations are very well known and very experienced about the energy sector. But in the projects in the market, not all of them though, in some of them, they see that experienced and quality shareholders' equity in these projects works as a catalyst and form a fund in this respect and left its management to Crescent Capital. Fund investing not only in Turkey but in the region such as Southeast Caucasia, Europe, mostly in clean energy and power plants. Not only wind but any type of clean energy. In our portfolio, there are about in total of 7 to 8 projects, and among these there are solar systems, hydroelectric plants, wind projects in construction phases. So in development, construction and operational phases there are 7 to 8 projects. What do? We do not finance the shareholders' equity of the owners of the projects. That is a big misunderstanding. We provide equity to the projects and become partner in the projects. And in the projects that we become partner, we participate in the credit financing process and make the projects pass the construction phase and become operational. So the approach that let's take 70% credit and take the rest 30% equity from a fund is not the reality. So we create a value by looking at the stage of the project or the license, and it adds the value it gets when it transfers to other future partners in the equity of the project. Therefore, it completes the shareholders' equity required by the banks and catalyzes the process of making the project alive. Here is the biggest problem from our point is valuing the project. The project developers, especially 10 years ago, were the worst case take criteria that is not realistic to value their projects. For instance, they show the project cost very low from its realistic levels. They do not add the cost of financing as well as the other costs on top of the turbine costs that they include. They also do not add the unforeseen costs that may happen in the future. Therefore, the project developers come to us with unrealistic project costs. This is the first problem. Second is the electric prices. Until recently, they assume that there is a base $10 and there will be a constant increase in the future, and when they come to us saying that in my model there is electricity cost assumption of $10, we try to tell them that that does not work in any country and it will not be in Turkey either. However, recently the project owners that could not get financing started to look at this issue more realistically. And thirdly, since our topic is wind, I will touch that although there are some other aspects other than wind power. It is the real productivity of the wind. Because in many studies there are not many data and they are made with feasibility that did not evaluate the data realistically. And since the wind expectations in the project is too high, sometimes there is a big difference between their value and the value that we evaluate. This is another problem when we are working with project owners. We try to avoid this and say that, okay, let's accept this project from your values, but after the project started and we get the real values, let's revalue the project with these values and give you the difference. But they do not accept this approach either. For instance, we are talking about 40 megawatt wind project. The project owner assumes that this project will cost about 40 million euros with everything. He says that the wind on my project is really good. The banks can finance up to 80% of the project, so I need 20% equity, which amounts to 8 million euros. Then he says that the value of a of 1 megawatt in my project is 300,000 euro. So there is total value of 12
İkincisi elektrik fiyatı.
euro in my
Proje
project.
sahipleri yani bundan bildiğimiz biliyoruz. Birkaç sene öncesine kadar herkes
I mean
ya işte
12 million euro in my project. You give my 6 million for the 50% of the project. I will take the 4 million of it and put it into equity. I will keep the 2 million for myself. And you add 4 million on top of the 50% of the equity. By this way, they think that they can own half of the project without putting down any money, in fact, putting $2 million into their pockets. Yes, there may be a really good project and this may happen, but to be a good project, the evaluation of the project should have been done really good and the wind data should have been proven very well. From our point of view, if that same 40 megawatt project costs $50 million and if we think that the banks will finance 70% of it, in 1 second the 30% equity increases to 15 million. It is almost 2 times the equity he was assuming. And if we value 1 megawatt of the project as 200,000 euro rather than 300,000 euro, suddenly the total value that may be given to this project is 8 million euro. Here, the problem is in Turkey. Once they have the license, they put aside the agreements that will be made with the turbine manufacturers, financing, structuring, and assume that the license owner realizes the total value of the project, and in this case, the agreement becomes impossible. How can we avoid this? We try to start working with our partners together at the very beginning of the licensing phase and we create the value together. So there is not issue of I value this much and you value that much, because we value the project together. We had some successful examples of this. Another point, when you work with experienced project developers, they have more realistic assumptions and say we think that our project has this value and you give us a certain percentage of this value during the license transfer today. And when the project comes to life, you give us another % of the value. When the project developers come to us with the software, it is easier for us to work with them. And if the project works as it is assumed, the value is realized as they are assumed, then it is easier to share that value. The third point is, when we work with other financial creditors, our job becomes easier because their expectations, risk profile, point of view match with ours. We had examples of this, especially abroad. According to me, the most important thing and the obstacle in front of us about the current license is, as Meltem Hanım mentioned, the problem of royalty. A few years ago, nobody was thinking about entering YEKTEM, but as you know today, both the banks and the project owners started to make projections on YEKTEM when the electricity prices realized lower than they expected. However, do not forget that the YEKTEM prices will be behind the market prices because YEKTEM is not indexed to the inflation. In reality, in 5 years, the electricity prices will be determined by the demand and supply and will pass the values of YEKTEM. The important thing here is making realistic long-term projections. Together with this, another big problem is royalty. These charges are based on kilowatt hour and also it is indexed to the increasing electricity prices in the market. Therefore, since YEKTEM is not indexed to the inflation but royalty are, the reason that the best projects cannot be accomplished is the royalty system that was introduced in 2007. If these royalties were structured in a different way, because of the experiences today it were taken based on megawatt and paid at the beginning, I think more than half of the non-achieved wind projects would be achievable. We can get into detail if there is a question about the topic. Thank you. Is there any question to Aydın Bey? I would like to ask something. If we think of you as a partner, in which stage is better for you to become a partner? Is it at the measuring stage or after connection permission is taken or after the license is taken? When we founded the fund, we talked with our investor long about this topic. As I'm in the energy financing for about 17 years, I think that it is important for us to be flexible to enter into the process in every stage. Therefore, after long discussions, we took this flexibility from our investors. Now today we become partner even in the measuring stage and even after the construction started. I would like to give some information about pricing. In Europe, in general, there is an expectation that the electricity prices will increase about 15% in the following year. In Turkey, the private sector is developing. Now there will be a rule change in Turkey about the natural gas in a few months. Right now there is a monopoly in Turkey as BOTAŞ. This monopoly will be abolished and as it is gone it will reflect on the prices positively. However, to make the system sustainable, there may be some positive and also some negative effects. As a prediction, the prices are predicted to increase. How do the finance world and investment world assess these predictions? What are your predictions on this issue? This is a very good question. It is one of the most important and critical and difficult aspects of our job. In many renewable energy project financing around the world, price prediction is made from the actual price lists for 15 or 20 years. But in Turkey, for a real project valuation, it is necessary to make a 15 or 20-year price projection. The most important thing here, because of the DNA of Turkey's energy sector, is gas and oil prices. The gas prices around the world are a direct factor to determine the electricity prices in Turkey. How do we deal with this? When you look at the previous 5-year projections of the world's best consultants, although they are all for 20 years, they make different projections each year. So it is very difficult. What do we do? First, we look at different projections in the market. Based on this, we form the long-term projections of the fund. And we look at what the oil and gas prices will be in the world and look at the demand and supply balance of Turkey and how it will change when we develop our own projections. We think that there is a consensus at one point. It is a difficult topic. It is one of the most important risks that investors have to take in Turkey. Thank you. Your question to Aydın Bey. Aydın Bey, you manage capital fund. Is there any limit? In reality, there is no limit on project base. The fund is managing approximately $100 million, but based on project, the fund's investors can get into the project. In renewables, the size of the project is generally certain, so there is no limit in that aspect. Unless it is a very big dam project, we'll look at any of projects. I would like to ask Aydın Bey about financing. You're a corporation founded in Turkey. You want to get credit from one of the banks here. One day you will start to finance a project and there is no way you can give the assurances needed for the project. Because you do not have a system that can make bigger size project financing. How do you solve this problem? We are solving that problem right now. In projects in general, we have partners generally. We make agreements with them even if there is recourse during the construction phase. In fact, in wind, the main problem during the construction phase is cost overrun and there is not a significant risk. We can manage this with an agreement between the partners and tell the banks this way. Second, there are examples that we can solve this even in hydraulic plants. But according to me, the reason that there have been no non-recourse financing is due to the Turkish project owners. We do recourse finance abroad, but in all of them there is significant watertight EPC contract. This EPC contract brings some more extra costs to the project. In these projects, we put a little bit bigger than normal equity, or sitting down with project banks or determine the project's payback profile. But in Turkey, in order to act faster and avoid any extra cost, project owners say I will sign for 7 or 8 months. I will pay my security and extracts. And the banks say yes in this situation. That is why it is not used in Turkey. I think Turkish banks play an unbelievable role in Turkish energy sector. I will have a question about economy assessment. It is obvious that the prices of coal getting cheaper. In Europe, there is an increasing investment in coal. The trend is going upwards. According to you, how will these investments affect the renewable energy investments? In the long term, coal's effect on the renewable energy price is negative at first look. Normally, when the gas prices go downward, it has a downward effect on electricity prices, and thus the renewable energy is fed by the electricity prices. In the first look, there is a negative effect. However, there is an overlooked point, that this is the environment. Right now, it is free to pollute the environment in Turkey. But it will not be the same forever. When the carbon emissions are priced, this will affect the electricity prices. So, it is not easy to estimate the long terms. It's a complex topic. In our view, the plateau that the electricity prices in Turkey will reach is apparent, and we think they will balance each other.
En az bir 3-4 yıl sonraki fiyatları öngörmekte fayda var diye düşünüyorum. Sizin öngörüleriniz ne yöndedir acaba?
Çok önemli, çok güzel bir soru. Bizim yaptığımız işin de belki en kritik, belki de en zor noktalarından bir tanesi. Birçok yenilebilir enerji finansmanında, dünyada yapılanlarda ya İşte feed-in tarifler 20 yıllık, 15 yıllık uzun vadeli belirli feed-in tarifler üzerinden fiyat öngörüsü yapılıyor. İşte orada da şu anda bildiğiniz gibi dünyanın bazı yerlerinde regulatory risk dediğimiz farklı riskler ortaya çıkıyor. Ama Türkiye'de baktığınız zaman bir enerji yatırımcısının mutlaka gerçekçi 4 sene de değil, 5 sene de değil, 20 yıllık elektrik fiyat projeksiyonu yapması gerekiyor. Buradaki de en önemli şey, Türkiye'nin enerji yapısının DNA'sından dolayı aslında petrol ve gaz fiyatları. Yani gaz fiyatlarının ne olacağı, dünyada global olarak gaz fiyatlarının ne olacağı, Türkiye'deki elektrik fiyatlarını kesinlikle birebir etkileyen en önemli faktör. Şimdi biz bunu nasıl diyet edebiliyoruz? O çok da zor bir şey. Yani gidip en iyi danışmanlardan 20 yıllık projeksiyon aldığınız zaman, bugün dünyanın en iyi danışmanlarının bundan önceki 5 seneki projeksiyonlarına baktığınız hepsi 20 yıllık. Ama her sene birbirinden çok farklı projeksiyonlar yapıyorlar. Yani dünya uzun vadeli ama seneden seneye bunu değiştiriyor. Yani zor bir şey. Biz ne yapıyoruz? Bir piyasadaki değişik projeksiyonlara bakıyoruz. Kendi tecrübemizle bunları internally fonun kendi uzun vadeli finansman projeksiyonlarını kuruyoruz. Bir yandan da dünyada uzun vadede gaz ve petrol fiyatlarının ne olacağını çok ciddi bir şekilde göz önüne alarak ve Türkiye'nin arz talep dengesini nasıl gelişeceğini göz önüne alarak kendi projeksiyonlarımızı yapıyoruz. Aşağı yukarı belli bir noktada konsensus olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Ama tabii yani shale gas bundan 4-5 sene önce hiç ortada olmadığı için şu anda dünyada çok büyük etkisi oldu. Yani kömür fiyatlarına direkt etkisi oldu. Zor bir konu. Türkiye'deki enerji yatırımcılarının alması gereken en önemli risklerden bir tanesi bu.
Teşekkür ediyoruz. Aygan Bey sorumuz.
Rasim'le araya sorum. Aygan Bey, sermaye fonu yönetiyorsunuz. Bunun tarihinden bahsetmeniz ya da bir limit var mı?
Limit proje bazında aslında yok şöyle çünkü fonun kendi yönettiği kaynağın haricinde fon şu anda aşağı yukarı 100 milyon dolara yakın bir kaynak yönetiyor. Ama proje bazlı fonun yatırımcıları bizim yanımıza koymasın dediğimiz şekilde projelere katılabiliyorlar. Yani yenilebilirde de zaten proje büyüklükleri aşağı yukarı belli. O yüzden proje bazlı bir limitimiz yok. Yalnız çok büyük barajlı konumuz değil ama yani çok büyük barajlı projeler haricinde hemen hemen her yenilenebilir enerji projesine bakıyoruz.
Aygan Bey, finansmanla ilgili bir soru sormak istiyorum. Siz de Türkiye'de kurulmuş bir fonsunuz. Sonuçta buradaki bankalarımızdan birinden kredi kullanacaksınız. Ama bir fonsunuz, büyük bir balans şitiniz yok.
Doğru.
Bir gün finansman, siz de bir proje gerçekleştireceksiniz ve oradaki teminatların çoğunu veremeyecek durumdasınız fon olarak. Çünkü hala mevcutta pure project finance yapabilen bir sistemimiz yok. O sorunu nasıl çözmeyi düşünüyorsunuz fon olarak?
O sorunu çözüyoruz. Şu anda da çözüyoruz. Bir, projelerde genelde proje sahibi ortaklarımız oluyor. Onlarla aramızda yapacağımız anlaşmalarla inşaat dönemi, özellikle rüzgarda bu çok zor değil. İnşaat dönemindeki riskleri recourse olsa bile sonuçta inşaat döneminde bir rüzgar projesindeki risk cost overrun ki bizce çok önemli bir risk değil ve de çok uzun süreli bir risk değil. Onu bir şekilde biz ortaklar arasında kendi aramızdaki anlaşmayla halledebiliyoruz. Ve onu da bankalara o şekilde yapıyoruz. İki, bunu hidrolarda bile çözdüğümüz örnekler var. Ama bence aslında Türkiye'de şu ana kadar non-recourse finansmanın yapılmamasının sebebi biraz da Türk yine proje sahiplerinden kaynaklanıyor. Bunun sebebi biz yurt dışında bazı ülkelerde şu anda tamamen non-recourse finansman yapıyoruz ama onların hepsinde çok ciddi bir watertight EPC kontrat var. Bu EPC kontrat biraz projeye ekstra maliyet getiriyor. Ve bu projelerde biz normalden biraz daha fazla öz sermaye koyuyoruz. Yani ya da proje bankalarıyla oturup projenin geri ödeme profilini ya da projenin içinde kendi içerisinde normal borç ödeme hesabı dışında volatilite rezervleriyle bir şekilde yapılandırabiliyoruz. Ama Türkiye'de proje sahibi hem hızlı ilerlemek açısından hem maliyetini ucuza getirmek açısından ya öyle yapacağımı ben 7-8 aylık imzalarım, kefaletini veririm, hızlı yürürüm dediği için bankalarda doğal olarak ya madem öyle peki öyle yapalım dediği için bana göre bugüne kadar çok fazla kullanılmadı ama yöntemleri var. Bunun için ilgi de var bankalarda. Bence Türk bankaları bugün enerji sektöründe inanılmaz bir rol oynadılar. Onlar olmasaydı bu sektör buraya kesinlikle gelemezdi. Ve açıklardı. Yeter ki karşı taraf bu yapılandırmaya uygun bir know-how sahibi olsun.
Benim genel bir ekonomi değerlendirmeyle ilgili sorum olacak. Bu kaya gazına bağlı olarak ucuzlayan kömür fiyatları ortada. Bu Avrupa'da artan kömür yatırımları da ortada. Yani eğilim biraz daha yukarı doğru gidiyor. Bu artan kömür yatırımları yeni enerji finansmanı nasıl etkiler sizce?
Uzun vadede kaya gazının yenilenebilir enerji fiyatlarına etkisi ilk bakışta aslında negatif. Yani normalde gaz fiyatının azalması ve bir şekilde gaz ve petrol endeksinin ortadan kalkmasıyla elektrik fiyatlarına bunun aşağı yönde bir etkisi olmasından dolayı ve yenilenebilir enerji de tabii ki elektrik fiyatlarından beslendiği için ilk bakışta öyle bir şey var ama daha göz ardı edilen başka bir nokta var. O da çevre kirlenmesi. Yani şu anda Türkiye'de ve birçok yerde çevreyi kirletmek bedava. Bu her zaman böyle olmayacak. Bir noktada karbon emission'lar fiyatlandırıldığı anda onun için herhangi bir vergisel düzenleme yapıldığı ya da başka türlü düzenleme yapıldığı anda bir anda yine bunun elektrik fiyatlarına etkisi olacaktır. O yüzden şu anda gerçek anlamda uzun vadedeki etkisini kestirmek çok kolay değil, biraz daha kompleks bir soru. Ama bizim görüşümüzce aşağı yukarı Türkiye'deki elektrik fiyatlarının ulaşacağı plato aşağı yukarı belli ve bunlar birbirini dengeleyecektir diye düşünüyoruz.
I would like to give some extra information. Although it looks like it is free to pollute right now, as ministries, we are studying on the carbon pollution and it is being researched which one will be helpful to the environment in Turkey. These are studies right now to establish the infrastructure to form carbon markets. This will not happen in the long period but in the near future. There is also the topic of forming an energy exchange. What kind of effect does natural gas have on the electricity? It is not easy to figure out all the time. Sometimes it is positive, sometimes negative. In fact, it is the biggest concerns of financiers. They have to make these estimations for long term.
Öngörmekte çok mümkün olmuyor. Zaten finansçıların sanırım en büyük sorunu bu öngörüleri çok uzun vadeli yapmak zorunda kalmaları. Günlük değişen bir değerin çok uzun yıllara yayılı olarak fiyatını öngörmek. Biz Aydın Bey'e çok teşekkür ediyoruz.
We thank you, Aydın Bey. He talked about different topics.
Evet, aramızda IFC var. Yine kurumsal olarak farklı finansman çalışmaları var. IFC Dünya Bankası'nın kuruluşlarından bir tanesi. IFC özel sektörün gelişmesi için çok farklı modellerle çalışabilen
We have here IFC. Again, as an institution, they have different financing studies. IFC is one of the World Bank's corporations. IFC is making duties in a more formal structure to develop the private sector. Tunç Bey has already worked in Turkey in finance as well as Balkans and Middle East. He will inform us about the work of IFC. He will try to get information about what we can do on wind and renewables, investment medium, capital contribution usage. So the floor is yours, Tunç Bey. Thank you. As we come closer to the end of the panel, the topics we can talk about gets fewer. I'll try to give my perspective on the issues. Meltem Hanım told us with a very successful presentation about how the banks approach the wind energy sector. I will say exactly the same things with her. Our approach is also very similar. I will emphasize the side that we give more weight on. But before that, briefly, I will tell who we are as IFC, what we are doing, what we have done in Turkey until today. IFC is one of the World Bank Group corporations. Its partners are 165 countries and Turkey is one of them. Right now we are in operation in more than 160 countries and at the moment we have a global portfolio of $4.5 billion that we provide to the energy sector. Our Istanbul office is very big. There are about 200 employees. This office is not just responsible for Turkey, but it is managing Europe, North Africa, Middle East too. It is a pride for our country. This increases our efficiency and we are closer to our investors. Many of our management level are also in Istanbul right now.
Etkinliğimizi arttırıyor. Yatırımcılarımıza daha yakınız. Uzmanlarımız, yönetim kademelerimizin birçoğu da şu anda İstanbul'da. Bu zamana kadar biz Türkiye'de neler gerçekleştirdik? Enerji alanında yaklaşık 500 milyon dolarlık kendi katkımız oldu.
What have we accomplished in Turkey until today? In energy sector, we had a contribution of $500 million. More than this amount, we became the intermediary for the other banks and financial institutions to invest in the energy sector. As I mentioned before, Meltem Hanım summarized the approach of the banks to the sector. Our approach is not different from this. One aspect we give weight on is that we look at our investments in comparison. We try to take lessons from our experiences from other countries as well. The question that is always asked is that, of course, we had to assess this internally too. What makes Turkey different? Why should we invest in Turkey? Why did we invest in Turkey? And consider investing more as IFC. There are some reasons for this, and I will try to give them in comparison. The first one is the wind potential. We compare with the surrounding countries. The wind values are at very high levels. We look at Romania and Bulgaria. The wind efficiencies are around 25% or 30%. Above 30% level is an exception. However, when we look at the values in Turkey, these numbers are very high. There are some projects whose efficiency levels are above 40%, which I cannot call as an exception. Of course, this affects the project's feasibility in a very positive way, and this is very important for us as financier and the equity partner. The second one is legal regulation is major. In South Europe, many countries established their own mechanism and they are trying to develop them. However, they are not at the mature state. They are not in a predictable situation. As Murat Bey mentioned, predictability is very important for us. We do not want to see that 2 days later, a year later, our projects get affected negatively by changing legal environment. No investors want that. Therefore, we prefer the countries with mature legal regulation environment. Let's give an example. There is an investment financing we made in Bulgaria for about 156 megawatt. When we gave approval for this project, everything was fine. Bulgaria had become an EU member. It was foreseen that the legal regulation would have come to a certain maturity level, but the expectation did not realize. When it got into operation in 2010, the power connection had not been realized yet because the public agency had not made the investment for the transmission line. Then, 6 months later, a law change was performed and there was a change in price mechanism. Our prediction of 110 euro megawatt hour dropped down to 96 euro. This was a serious change for us. Maybe the electricity purchasing timelines were lengthened, but this change in the electricity prices was something we had never predicted. In the following periods, the legal regulations continued to change and a new contribution was added for the connection to the newer existed transmission line. These are the reflection of immature legal regulation system. When we look at Turkey, although there are changes in the structure, we never expect a radical change in the legal structure. The third point, we took lesson from our experiences, as I mentioned in Bulgaria example, is the connection to the transmission line. Your project may be very good, your feasibility is very good, you can achieve every aspect of the project on time, but if there is no transmission line in place, that project has no value anymore. As long as you cannot sell your electricity, you have a problem. Since the application in Turkey is different, like you ask to TWEC first and get approval, and then you get a license, we did not encounter any problem in this area. The last point about why Turkey is attractive. During 2006, 2007 and 2009, when the wind investments were increasing, foreign investors were coming to Turkey to tell their experiences. At that point, I was not working in IFC, and when I heard the different experiences in different countries, I got astonished. The point that I got astonished was that how the electricity prices were much higher than they were in Turkey. As I gave the example in Bulgaria, it is 110 euro, 92 euro in Serbia, 95 euro in Croatia. These are very high prices. When the investors present these values to us, we were reluctant to mention Turkey example. However, the situation changed, especially after 2010 because of some legal changes in those countries and unexpected developments. The investors in those countries began to hurt, and they started to say maybe the price in Turkey may be low, such as $73 level, but at least there is an alternative to this. At least I can sell this electricity to the market after I produce the electricity. I can also take a price above $73 sometimes. This alternative is very important for both investors and financiers. Yes, there are institutional prices and they are very attractive, but we will take these into consideration. But at least when he had a problem in here, there will be guaranteed prices. The existence of these alternatives is very important for us. I have only talked about the positive sides. We had also negative sides too. As Aydın Bey, Meltem Hanım mentioned, the main problem is high contribution fee, the royal payments. Unfortunately, the high levels of these payments affect the feasibility of projects substantially, and we had to put aside these projects unwillingly. As a result, when the electricity price is around 5 to 6 euro and your royalty payment is around 2 to 3 euro, it is difficult to make money as an investor and at the same time pay to your creditors. What happens in this case? Either the project is left out, or if not left out, the indemnity of the partners had to be kept until the end of the project, which means not until the end of the construction, but until all the payments are made to the creditors. And since it is difficult to find investors who are financially that strong, we have to go the fewer stronger investors. The second point we would like to advance in Turkey is the availability of long-term electricity sales contracts. Right now, unfortunately, we know the longest maturity of these agreements are 1 year, and in the following period after the electricity privatization projects are completed, this market gets mature. We hope that long-term electricity sales contracts will enable us to provide financing in longer maturity dates like 15 or 16 years, which are now 12 or 13 years. And we think a project financing structure where there will be no indemnity for the partners, which called pure project finance, can be installed in this case. Third point about Turkey is about the capital. We think there are two different investor groups. One has the capital but does not have the knowledge. The other is he has knowledge but does not have the capital. For the first group, they have an extensive experience in another field. We are happy to help them to transfer their knowledge, and it is possible to work with them. However, for the second group, we have some problems. And the reason for this is that, as Aydın Bey mentioned, the investment amount is lower than expected. Based on our comparisons, or based on the projects we did in Turkey, we could see that these projects amounts are not realistic. In this case, when the capital need is increased and we think that the investor does not have enough capital, it is difficult for us to support the project. What is our difference as IFC? What are different from the we are different from the Turkish banks in a way that first we cannot finance all the project total, meaning we can loan only a certain portion of the credit amount other than from the equity, and this is limited to 25% of the total project cost. In addition, a point that we differ is that we can enter into the project as an investor, but there are two fundamental issues here for us to be an investor. One of them is that the project should have a certain rate of profitability, for the IRR being higher than a certain level, and the second one is that we would like to exit the project when we would like to enter project. If we invest in only one wind project, this exit becomes difficult because since the size of the project is generally lower than a certain level, it is not possible to exit with a public offering. Therefore, the only project that we enter as an investor are generally portfolio projects. We need to see that there are more than one project, and any problem in a project can be compensated by another project. A third point how we differ is that we not only provide financing to projects but also provide financing to banks, other financial institutions including leasing as IFC. We want these financing to be channeled to certain kind of projects. Of course, the cost is different and we want the banks reflect these low costs to the investors. These are the things I would like to talk about. I can take your questions. The investors come to you in two ways. First, for financing, and the other is capital partnership. It is good to ask something here. The investor will apply to IFC without using an intermediary bank. Is it the same process for both? It can be both. They can apply to the bank that we provide financing, but they can also come to us for projects bigger than $50 million. I would like to ask, how long does your assessment process after an investor comes to you directly? That changes based on the project. We are infamous in the market about this issue, but if the project is big and comprehensive and the investor is not sophisticated, our process gets longer. This depends on how much the investor is prepared first and second on the negotiations we have with the investor. In other words, it does not only depend on IFC processes. What I am asking, what is your average assessment time? On average, from the application to signing the credit contract, I can say it is about 4 to 6 months. If we say that as an investor we meet the 30% of the project, then we apply the rest 30% of it. Did I say right? Yes. And for the rest of the amount, do you also provide support for financing negotiation, or is it totally independent? Thank you for the question. We can provide only a certain portion of the credit package. For the rest of the credit package, we are on the side of the investor. Since we have connections with financiers in a lot of countries, we can make those financiers act together with us. So we can show you as a reference. Not only reference, but also when we bring those financiers to the project, you only see IFC in front of you. IFC is negotiating with them on your behalf at the background. Now, you said that you can say exactly the same things Meltem Hanım mentioned in her speech. Of course, if you look at from the micro level, these responsibilities are important. The investors and financiers stay one-to-one and everybody tries to get their share. If you look at the fundamentals, wind power is not only the subject of the investor and financier, it is also subject of a sustainable economy. In this regard, investor gets into much more burden than the creditor. Financier in one way or other takes the guarantees that will supply its needs. So the person who faces the risks is the investor. While working at the micro level, the investor gets the biggest loss. I think that a way should be found to share this risk with the government agencies and financial firms. Otherwise, as Meltem Hanım said at the end of her presentation, 5,000 megawatt of license is distributed, and it takes longer since the risk is not shared by everybody, but just by the investor. We did not encounter this problem in Turkey, but there were some other countries where we encountered it. I have a different view on this though. In terms of risk distribution, the investor does not get all the risk. The banks give the 70 to 80% of the financing, so they are taking more risk than the investor at some sense. If a problem occurs with the project, the investor loses only 30% of the total investment. But the banks have much more burden. We did not have many problems in Turkey, but in those countries we had problems. We tried to act like an intermediary between the investor and public agencies. In the end, we are not a public corporation. IFC is a part of the World Bank Group. We are an investor, but since our partners are the nations, our positioning is a little different. So, if there is an issue that affects the investor, we are on the side of the investor, but we are at the side of the risk taker, and in fact, we undergo also a lot of risk.
Şimdi bu yaklaşık 2 saatlik görüşmede konuşulanlara, özellikle Meltem Hanım'ın sunumunun altına imza attığınızı söylemiştiniz. Tabii ki mikro açıdan bakıldığı zaman bu savunulan sorumluluklar önemli. Yani tabii ki burada yatırımcıyla finansör baş başa kalıyor. Herkes kendi hakkını, kendi geleceğini garanti altına almak zorunda. Yani temeline baktığınız zaman makro açıdan rüzgar enerjisi aslında sadece yatırımcı ve finansörün sorumlu olan bir proje değil. Bu sürdürülebilir ekonominin bir zorunluluğu olarak şu anda konuşuluyor. Açıkçası benim tüm buradaki misafirlerimize burada yatırımcı tabii daha çok elini taşın altına koyuyor. Finansör bir şekilde eğer varsa yatırımcının elinde kendini garanti edecek teminatları alıyor. Dolayısıyla risklerle karşı karşıya kalan aslında yatırımcı. Makro açıya hizmet etmek için uğraşırken belki de en büyük kaybı kendisi görüyor. Benim sorum ve ricam bu konuda belki de finans kuruluşları olarak devlet kurumlarıyla bu riskin paylaşılmasının bir yolunun bulunması diye düşünüyorum. Aksi takdirde biraz önce Meltem Hanım'ın sunumunda 5000 megawatt sanıyorum değil mi? Dağıtılan lisans ve bunun kurulma süreci her geçen sene uzuyor. Temelde de muhtemelen finans kuruluşlarıyla yatırımcıların riskte tek başlarına kalması olduğunu düşünüyorum. Bu konuda neler var gelecek projeksiyonda?
Yani Türkiye'de tabii bu sorunla karşılaşmadık ama karşılaştığımız, sonra sıkıntı yaşadığımız başka ülkeler oldu. Yani şöyle bir yalnız farklı bir bakış açım var benim. Açıkçası risk dağılımı açısından tek riski alan yatırımcı olmuyor. Yani 30'a 70 bir finansmandan bahsediyorsak bankalar 70'ini sağladıkları vakit takdir edersiniz ki daha çok ellerini taşın altına koymuş oluyorlar. Ve bir projede sıkıntı olduğu zaman sermayedar sadece %30'uyla bir zarar yaşamış oluyor ama bankalar çok daha fazlasıyla sıkıntı çekiyorlar orada. Şimdi iletişim açısından Türkiye'de dediğim gibi bu sıkıntı çok yaşanmadı ama yaşadığımız ülkelerde biz IFC olarak yatırımcıyla o ilgili kamu kuruluşları arasında aracılık görevini yerine getirmeye çalışıyoruz. Şöyle ki çünkü sonuçta IFC bir Dünya Bankası grubu üyesi. Biz bir kamu kuruluşu değiliz. Bir yatırımcıyız. Ama bizim ortağımız devletler olduğu için bizim ayrı bir konumlanmamız söz konusu. Dolayısıyla yatırımcıyı etkileyen mevzuat olsun veya işte kamu kuruluşlarının başka bir tedbiri olsun, onunla ilgili her daim yatırımcının yanında yer alıyoruz. Ama dediğim gibi Türkiye'de böyle bir sıkıntıyla karşılaşmadık ama yani risk açısından kesinlikle biz risk alan tarafın yanında yer alıyoruz ve biz de risk alıyoruz fazlasıyla.
We thank Tunç Bey. As ministry, our biggest problem with the World Bank is connection. We pay royalty fees for connection permits. A topic that we think about is that to have a quality connection standard in Turkey. In recent weeks, we connected to the EU lines and got the right to use limitlessly. These connections come into service after 5 or 6 years of normal work. We are working with the World Bank intensively to provide these connections to you as early as possible. We want to increase the connection capacity to very high levels.
Sistemimizin son 3 yıllık testten geçmesi sonucunda tabii ki bu bağlantılar normal bir çalışmayla bir 5-6 yıl sonra size sunulabilir durumda olacaktır. Dünya Bankası ile biz tabii bu bağlantıları daha erken size nasıl sağlarız? Bu konuda çok yoğun bir çalışma yapıyoruz. Bağlantı kapasitesini yenilenebilir de çok üst düzeylere çıkarmak istiyoruz. Daha ucuza bağlantı izni alabilmenizi daha çok sayıda yatırım yapılabilmesini sağlamak açısından bir altyapı çalışmamız var. Öte yandan
On the other hand, we have studies about banking sector in addition to our studies to give direct support to projects. Yeşim Hanım has been following the topics in the energy sector for a long time. We asked her to inform us today in the name of the World Bank. The floor is yours, Yeşim Hanım. Thank you. Hello everyone. Today I will explain why the wind energy is very important in both the world and Turkey by giving you some numbers. Later on, without mentioning the developments in the sector, since the other speakers already talked about it, I would like to tell what kind of projects we accomplished as the World Bank and talk about which ones of these projects are active and which ones are in the planning phase. As you see in these two pictures, climate change is a real threat to our world, and Turkey is one of the main countries that will get affected from this change. While normal values should be blue, as you see in the last 10 years, these values are pink or red. As you see, Turkey's situation is not that promising. As we look at the land warming in the last 10 years, I do not put the numbers in some countries, but I wanted to show it. For example, in America, the land warming is double the value of sea warming in terms of change. In Eurasia, it is 3 times, and in Antarctica, it is 3 or 4 times. And the climate change continues to be a threat. When we look at the greenhouse gases, we see that it has an opposite correlation with the economy. Although there was a small drop in 2008, the projections show that the increase will continue to grow. For the numbers in Turkey, I put the values on the table comparing 1990 and 2008. What are the changes in almost 20 years? The GDP growth is more than 2 times. Electricity production increased 245% and the consumption per capita increased 134%. But in parallel with these developments, there are some other developments as well. The greenhouse gas emissions increased about 2 times. Carbon dioxide emission increased more than 2 times. Greenhouse gas emissions due to electricity consumption increased 334%. If you look at OECD averages, although Turkey's GDP and carbon emissions are lower than the averages, its economy's energy and carbon intensity is above the averages. In addition, as you know, the energy resources in Turkey are limited, and we are dependent on the foreign important resources. And natural gas constitutes the biggest portion of it. Although half of the electricity production comes from natural gas, almost all of it is imported. Turkey's energy bill last year is not so promising. It amounts to more $60 billion. Energy constitutes 25% of the total exports and increased to 11% compared to the prior year. Another topic that should be paid attention is that current account deficit would be a surplus if there was no energy imports in 2012. While the other sectors are improving, the energy imports caused the current account deficit. Therefore, all renewable energy resources are important, including natural gas, as the numbers suggest that renewables are very important to decrease the greenhouse gas emission to try to fight with the climate change. As I said earlier, Turkey is among the countries that will get affected the most by the climate change. As it is in all renewable resources, wind power is also a production method that will cause demand increase. Also, to increase the dependability on important energy, the wind power plants are very important. As I said before, I will not touch the developments in Turkey, since the previous speakers very well covered the topic. I just want to emphasize a few topics so that when I talk why the World Bank got into the projects in Turkey, it will be better understood. As you see in map of Turkey, wind power plants are concentrated in certain regions. The reason is obvious. The wind does not blow the same everywhere. You can see here the ones in operation and the ones that are being planned. If we look at the regions, in terms of licensed projects, Marmara is the leader. Internal Anatolia, the central Anatolia follows it, and in other regions it goes in a decreasing rate. There are 3 provinces that attract attention. The highest number of licensed projects are in Izmir. After that, Çanakkale, and then Istanbul follows it. It is very good that there are licensed projects and that the potential is being used, but there are important duties for the World Bank, TWEC, and the Ministry of Energy to strengthen the network. A few minutes later, I will talk about what we are doing in this respect. If you look at the potential, it has been discussed that there is a huge potential, like 48 terawatt an hour. Right now it is much below that level. We know the target as we talked about it yesterday. As the World Bank, we see the target to reach 20,000 megawatts in 2023, unachievable with the current conditions. Although currently licensed projects are about 10,000 megawatts, as the president of APDK, Mr. Köktaş, said yesterday, there are problems with some of them right now, and it is difficult that all of them get into operation. There are a lot of constraints in the market. It has been talked about these constraints before. Some of them got eliminated with some good policies and reform process, but there are still non-cleared ones. I will mention the ones related to our projects, especially network constraints. Yesterday, the representative of Turkish Parliament said that they started to work on this issue. So, before I pass to what the World Bank is doing about renewable energy resources, in order to prevent confusion with what Tunç Bey said, I would like to say that under the roof of World Bank, there are various international organizations. One of them is IFC, which works together with private sector. The difference of the group that we called IBRD is that we do not work with the private sector directly, although we may work with them through intermediary banks. But we look for treasury guarantee in the projects in order for us to work with them. In Turkey, we directly work with state and treasury, and after we take its guarantee, we can work with the public organizations and financial banks, and through banks with the private sector. As IBRD Group, our energy portfolio in Turkey is more than $2 billion. In the last 10 years, this amount was in total more than $5 billion. While the World Bank is supporting the program in Turkey, on the other side it looks at the priorities of the improvement of supply security while increasing the energy efficiency. In addition, while investing in clean energy resources, our aim is to monitor the environmental effects and greenhouse gas effects. Moreover, we support the private sector investments increase in the renewable energy sector, and we do what we can do to improve Turkey's integration with the EU. I included here some of the projects that we work with the Turkish government, especially the wind projects. In 2004, we had a project that got into action with a size of $200 million, and it is completed by now. After seeing the demand in the renewable energy sector first in 2009, then in 2011, we started another project cooperation with additional financing, and its total size is around $1.1 billion. The institutions that we work with here as TSKB and TKB. Meltem Hanım already told us very well about what TSKB looks at in their financing issues. TSKB has developed its capacity through the years, especially in the renewable energy sector, and it is a bank that came to a really good position as both financial and human resource capacity. We have a partnership with them in the renewable energy market for about 10 years. Our partnership continues very well also with TWEC. Here also we benefited from the Clean Technology Funds. This is a fund with the amount of $100 million. In the last 10 years, 11 projects were financed in total, starting with one in 2004, and their capacity is 300,000 megawatts. This also continues. The credit that we gave in 2011 is still open, and only half of it has been used. In this regard, wind project will continue to be financed. As I said before, the transmission constraint is very important, because in order to connect the power plants that are concentrated in certain regions to the network, big investments are required. Because there are licensed projects and there will other potential licensed projects as well, especially in the three regions. Right now we have a planned project with TWEC. We will contribute an amount of $300 million and $50 million is going to come from CTF. Here the organization that we work with is TWEC. When we look at the components of this, there is a component of connecting the wind plants to the network at those three provinces that I mentioned, where most of the licensed projects concentrated: Izmir, Hamitabad, and Cem. On other hand, there is supported by smart networks, the development of SCADA, and the increments. There is the underwater cable. Maybe you have followed in the press. Right now there is an underwater cable construction between Lapseki and Sütlüce. It is financed by another project of ours together with TWEC. A second line parallel to this one will also be installed. Why is this important? In that region there are many wind power plants. When these projects are completed, the electricity that will be introduced in these plants will be able to transfer to Thrace. As you may know, in Thrace and some parts of Istanbul, there was shortage of power in few times. This project will help in this regard. If we look at the other projects, back then we worked with TWEC many times. 4 different projects were made and 3 of them completed. And as I said earlier, we are working on a project in the amount of $350 million. We also had a project with TERAŞ, which was privatized recently, that started in 2000s and completed last June. In that project, the distribution network's rehabilitation was accomplished. Moreover, we had credits of development policy which come as 3 series and amounts to more than $2 billion in total. These are credits used directly by the Treasury to support the energy sector reforms rather than by institutions and private sector through the banks. Among these there are again renewable energy, reform processes and various components related to reform. In terms of only investments, we do not have a cooperation with the Turkish government. At the same time, we have technical help projects. One of the most important of these is a consulting project made by TWEC after the 2007 applications made for wind. So, we gave consulting services on the integration of wind into the system and how to use smart networks. Now, together with the ministry, there is a project that we have been working on together with Murat Bey. Because of IPO funds not being used in Turkish energy sector for years, we were invited as the World Bank to intervene. Those funds will be used by the World Bank, the Ministry of Energy, for instance. We work together with them. Under this, there is the renewable energy component. The things that will be done there is determining the current situation, constraints, roadmaps, obstructions for the market, as well as integration of renewable energy to the distribution. Before I close, I would like to emphasize some points. Although wind energy is a new market in Turkey, its increase rate is unbelievable. It's very good. We talked about TWEC a few minutes ago. It is very important that TWEC financially and operationally be strong. We are supporting this as international organization and the World Bank. And one more thing not to forget is not to overlook the effects of wind power plants and their side projects on the environment and natural habitat. In order not to practice the same problems that we lived with hydroelectric with wind power, we should take precautions. What can these be? For instance, building more than 20 dams on the same river at first does not indicate any problems, but when we look cumulatively, we see that that river basin is affected negatively. Similarly, wind turbines do not create a problem by itself, but when multiple turbines are built in the same area or basin, the connection lines and the roads to each individual turbine can damage the environment and the natural habitat. Therefore, both the public agencies and private investors should investigate on this issue really well. Thank you very much. We can take your questions generally for every speaker. There is none. I would like to thank everyone for listening to us. We try to tell the project financing from different points here. The organizations present here are organizations of which Republic of Turkey is a partner of. We have our sources in them and we try to use them as much as possible. The people in the background are here today. IFC Turkey, I guess, became the world #1 as far as I know. Turkey is the country where the World Bank's EBRD invests the most of its resources. We think that this is also related to the human resource of Turkey, its investors, systems and private sector's foresights.
Mesela aynı nehir üzerinde 20'den çok hidroelektrik santrali belki isim verirken tek tek bakıldığında sıkıntı görünmemesine rağmen kümülatif bütünsel etkiye bakıldığında o nehir havzasının ne kadar kötü etkilendiğine şahit oluyoruz. Aynı şekilde rüzgar santralleri de belki tek başına sıkıntı yaratmıyor. Ama aynı bölgeye ya da aynı havzaya yapılacak olan rüzgar santralleri için her biri için ormanda ya da çevrede ulaşım yollarının ayrı ayrı açılması vesaire gibi konular çevreye ve habitata zarar verebiliyor. O yüzden bunu hem özel sektör yatırımcılarının hem kamu tarafının dikkatli incelemesi gerekiyor. Çok teşekkür ederim.
Sorumuzu alalım. Genel olarak paneldeki diğer konuklarla beraber bütünleşik olarak finansmanla ilgili herhangi bir soru yok. Ben herkese teşekkür ediyorum. Bizi dinledikleri için biraz farklı boyutlardan da proje finansmanına, öz kaynak açısından da size vizyon vermeye çalıştım. Burada bulunan uluslararası kuruluşlar, Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Devleti'nin hissesi olduğu, ortak olduğu kuruluşlardır. Dolayısıyla bizim kaynaklarımız da var orada ve biz bunları maksimum düzeyde kullanmaya çalışıyoruz. Aslında çalışmaların hep perde arkasındaki insanlar burada. IFC dünya birincisi oldu bildiğim kadarıyla Türkiye tarafı. Dünya Bankası ikinci, yine EBRD yine en üst seviyede dünyada en çok kaynak kullandıran branşları Türkiye oldu. Tabii bu Türk insan kaynağı, yatırımcının kalitesi, sistemin özel sektörün öngörülebilirliğiyle de ilgili olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Ben konuklarımıza
I thank all of our guests. We are organizing this panel with integration with the Ministry of Energy. Before we close, I would like to present the Deputy Minister's thank you certificate to our guests. I will start with Yeşim Hanım. Thank you very much. Meltem Hanım, you gave us very important information. We really feel like we got the education. Aydın Bey, thank you very much. You informed us with an alternative method. Çalışmalarınızı nasıl hazırladığınızla ilgili bize bilgi verdiniz. Andy, sana teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Seni diğer toplantılarda da görmek istiyoruz. Tüm katılanlara tekrar teşekkür ediyorum.
I thank you, all the participants and the attendants to this Congress, for both foreign people between us and Türkçe geçim yabancı misafirlerimiz de vardı. Ben herkese tekrar teşekkür ediyorum. Konuklarımıza ve katılımcılarımıza bu kongrede bizi aydınlattıkları için teşekkür ederim.